breaking news now coming in from Ottawa. The Prime Minister and his wife, Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, have released a statement announcing they have made the decision to separate after 18 years of marriage.
Sophie Grégoire Trudeau has finally spoken, tears revealing a story the world has only glimpsed. From the shocking yacht photos of Justin Trudeau and Katy to her heartfelt confession, the truth behind their separation is coming into focus. So, how did private heartbreak become a global spectacle? And what really happened between August 2023 and Justin's January 2025 resignation? Stay with us as we unravel every detail, from the public drama to the intimate realities of co-parenting, and uncover what Sophie was truly ready to share. The break. Sophie speaks, tears and all. She didn't dodge the question. On November 12th, Sophie Grégoire Trudeau simply exhaled, steadied herself, and said the words that instantly shifted the tone of the entire interview. "We're human beings. It hurts." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was the closest thing the public had gotten to the emotional truth behind a separation that had spent more than 2 years living under a microscope. And for the first time, Sophie chose not to hide just how deeply the headlines, the commentary, and the assumptions had affected her. Sitting across from the host on Arlene Is Alone, Sophie's voice wavered, not out of weakness, but because the conversation finally touched the pressure point she had avoided for months. She explained that she had spent so long trying to stay composed, trying to rise above the noise, that she almost forgot she was allowed to feel the weight of it all. The host didn't push. She didn't need to. Sophie voluntarily opened the door. She talked about triggers, not in a dramatic or clinical sense, but in the very real way public scrutiny can ambush someone's peace. A headline here, a social media comment there, a photo circulated without context. She described how these moments hit unexpectedly, like emotional landmines scattered across her day. "Stuff affects us," she repeated softly, almost as though reminding herself that acknowledging pain didn't mean she had failed. It meant she was human. Sophie then shifted into something even more revealing: choice. She explained that after the separation became public in August 2023, she spent months learning where her emotional boundaries were and where they needed to be. The world had opinions about the marriage, the split, and even about her role as a mother. Still, Sophie made it clear that she wasn't interested in providing stability for anyone. She was choosing how to react, what to internalize, and what to release. And when the conversation moved toward her family, her tone softened. Sophie emphasized that despite the headlines, speculation, and uncomfortable spotlight, co-parenting remained a non-negotiable priority. She noted that the separation didn't erase the years she and Justin spent building a life together, nor did it diminish their shared responsibility to create a stable environment for their 3 children. The public spectacle was loud, but inside their home, she insisted, the focus stayed on compassion, predictability, and respect. By the time the segment ended, it wasn't just an interview. It was a moment of release, a rare instance where a public figure allowed herself to be visibly affected, visibly honest, and visibly human. Sophie didn't offer scandal. She provided the truth. And for millions watching, that truth landed harder than any headline ever could. But how deeply had Sophie Trudeau's experiences shaped her, and were viewers ready to feel it too? Stay tuned to find out. The confession. How I've handled watching it all. This was more than a soundbite. When Sophie Grégoire Trudeau continued the conversation, she revealed how the images, the gossip, and the constant comparisons truly landed on her. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't bitter. It was simply honest, and that honesty carried the weight of someone who had been quietly absorbing public judgments for far longer than anyone realized. She admitted that the separation hurts deeply, echoing the same emotional thread she had revealed back in her 2024 interview with Katy, when she challenged the idea that a marriage is only a success if it lasts forever, and a separation is automatically a failure. That belief, she said then, was something she had to actively unlearn. Here, on Arlene is Alone, Sophie picked up that thread again, but now with the clarity of someone who has lived through the aftershocks. She explained that once the separation became public on August 2nd, 2023, she found herself navigating a new version of life, where even the most ordinary emotions became magnified by public opinion. A moment of sadness could be misinterpreted as regret. A moment of peace could be spun into indifference. She clarified that the true struggle wasn't the split itself. It was managing the world's reaction to it. The host asked gently about the photos and the headlines that had circulated in the months and years since, and Sophie didn't pretend they didn't affect her. She spoke openly about the feeling of seeing images of her former husband paired with celebrities, appearing carefree while the internet dissected her own silence. "I had to learn," she said, "how not to let those images define me." She admitted the first time she saw one of those widely shared photos, she felt a familiar tightening in her chest, a reflex she recognized immediately. It wasn't jealousy, she clarified. It was the shock of seeing private emotion turned into public spectacle. Sophie explained that triggers don't always look dramatic. Sometimes they look like a headline she didn't anticipate, or a comment passed along by a friend that she didn't want to hear, or an unexpected surge of public interest when she was simply trying to live quietly. She described it as a series of emotional tests, each one requiring her to choose how she wanted to respond, not just in the moment, but in the long-term shaping of who she was becoming. The conversation turned to identity, and Sophie's response was one of the most revealing parts of the interview. She admitted that after stepping out of the role of a prime minister's spouse, she had to reintroduce herself to herself. For years, she had been seen through the lens of political life, polished, composed, always expected to rise above. Now, she said, she was learning to claim space that wasn't defined by public position or marital status. She emphasized that the separation, while painful, had forced her to ask questions she had avoided. Who am I outside this marriage? What does fulfillment look like now? What do I want for myself beyond the expectations of an entire country? And then she acknowledged something that viewers rarely hear from public figures, that she is still figuring it out. Her interviews over 2024 and 2025 weren't contradictions. They were snapshots of a process. Pain, clarity, confusion, acceptance, and now a kind of fragile empowerment. Sophie didn't pretend to have reached the end of her emotional journey, but in finally admitting how she has handled watching it all unfold, she allowed viewers to witness a turning point. The moment she stopped letting the story happen to her and started choosing the story she would tell. But how would Sophie face the storm that was about to hit? And what would it reveal next? Keep watching. Photos, Yacht, and the moment that blew up the internet. Then the pictures hit. A yacht, a kiss, and a tidal wave of social media that swallowed the internet whole. It started quietly, almost innocently, with a few grainy previews circulating late at night. But within hours, the images were everywhere. Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry, unmistakable, relaxed, affectionate, and unmistakably together on a yacht off the coast of Santa Barbara. These were not formal photos or political optics. These were candid, unfiltered moments captured in late September and released to the world on October 11th and 12th, 2025, by major outlets including People, InStyle, and the Daily Mail. The shots were vivid. Katy Perry in a swimsuit, hair tied back, looking carefree and sunlit. Trudeau shirtless, visibly relaxed in a way that Canadians rarely saw during his years in public office. Some images showed them laughing. Others showed them nestled close together, silhouettes overlapping as they leaned into one another. And then came the one that detonated across the internet. The kiss. Not staged. Not coy. A genuine, in-the-moment kiss that confirmed every rumor the tabloids had been circling for months. What made the explosion even bigger was the buildup that preceded it. Back in July, Justin and Katy had already been spotted together in Montreal. First at a discreet cafe, then in a handful of blurry fan-shot videos that went viral before being deleted. At the time, public reaction was mixed, ranging from curiosity to disbelief and a sense of surely not. After all, Justin had only recently stepped away from political life in January 2025, and the separation from Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, announced on August 2, 2023, still felt relatively fresh for the public to process. But the sightings in Montreal planted the seed. The yacht photos, however, confirmed the story. By the time people published the high-resolution images on October 11th, followed by InStyle and the Daily Mail on October 12th, it was already too late to contain the digital wildfire. Social media platforms are overloaded with commentary, some playful, some supportive, and some viciously critical. Memes popped up within minutes. Threads broke down the timeline. TikTok creators analyzed body language. YouTube personalities posted reaction videos as though the images were a global revelation. The Santa Barbara setting also added fuel. It wasn't just any beach. It was a known getaway for Hollywood elites, musicians, and high-profile figures trying to escape the noise. Seeing Trudeau, formerly one of the most prominent leaders on the world stage, cuddling with one of pop's biggest icons in a location synonymous with celebrity privacy, created a collision of two worlds the public wasn't prepared for. And the conversation didn't stop at romance. It spilled into politics, culture, fandoms, and even international commentary. Some reacted with surprise, others with sharp criticism, and many simply stared in disbelief at how dramatically Trudeau's post office life had reshaped itself. But perhaps the most striking part wasn't the kiss itself. It was how natural they looked. Two people who didn't seem to be performing for any lens. That authenticity made the images impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss, and impossible for the internet to process quietly. In just 24 hours, the narrative shifted from rumor to certainty, and the ripple effect reached far beyond Santa Barbara. But what hidden moments and decisions led Sophie to this point, and how did the path from separation to public scrutiny unfold? Stay tuned to find out. Timeline check. From separation to resignation to romance. Let's slow this down for a moment because the internet tends to jumble emotions, events, and assumptions into one noisy timeline. Here's what actually happened, and when. The story begins long before the yacht photos or the headlines that followed. On August 2, 2023, Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau publicly announced their separation after 18 years of marriage, a union that began back in 2005 and produced 3 children, Xavier, Ella Grace, and Hadrian. It was a moment Canadians never expected, one of the country's most familiar political partnerships suddenly shifting into something new. At that time, both emphasized stability, respect, and co-parenting, and Sophie continued her long-standing advocacy work in mental health and wellness. After the separation announcement, Trudeau continued in office, but public pressure and political fatigue were becoming increasingly visible. The next major shift came in January 2025, when Justin formally stepped back and resigned as the Liberal Party leader, closing a chapter that had defined Canadian politics for nearly a decade. Reports reflected a man ready to transition out of the relentless scrutiny of public life, someone recalibrating his identity outside the demands of national leadership. Many assumed he would retreat into quiet reflection or spend more dedicated time with his children. But by mid-2025, the narrative took an unexpected turn. In July, Justin Trudeau was spotted in Montreal with global pop icon Katy Perry. At first, the sightings were brushed off. Two celebrities in the same city, perhaps crossing paths casually. But the images captured by locals told a different story. The pair walking closely, talking easily, and appearing more familiar than the public would have guessed. The whispers grew into conversations, and by late September 2025, the turning point arrived. Trudeau and Perry were photographed together off the coast of Santa Barbara, sharing intimate moments aboard a private yacht. Although the photos were taken in September, they didn't reach the public until October 11th to 12th, 2025, when outlets such as People, InStyle, and the Daily Mail released them in rapid succession. Once the images circulated, everything from Trudeau's post office life to his romantic choices became subjects of global debate. Seeing this timeline clearly is important because it reveals how each chapter led naturally into the next. The separation in 2023, Trudeau's resignation in January 2025, the quiet sightings in July, and finally, the yacht photos in October. None of it appeared overnight. It was a progression, a transition from a public marriage to a private readjustment, and eventually a new relationship, all under a spotlight bright enough to distort perspective. By laying out the sequence, the story becomes less chaotic, less tabloid noise, and more a clear evolution, one that still landed with seismic impact once the world connected all the dots. But what private decisions and unseen moments have kept the family balanced amid global scrutiny? And how have they managed it all? Don't blink, you'll want to see this next. Co-parenting, privacy, and the personal cost. Behind the headlines, 3 kids still need calm, and both Sophie Grégoire Trudeau and Justin Trudeau have remained firm on one thing. Their separation did not dissolve their commitment to raising Xavier, Ella Grace, and Hadrian with stability and unity. Sophie has said repeatedly that she is definitely not a single mom, a statement that cuts through the noise and redirects attention to the quietly cooperative partnership happening away from the cameras. For all the speculation about their personal lives, the reality is that the family structure didn't collapse. It reshaped itself. Sophie has always been vocal about protecting her children's privacy, long before the separation became public. Even during her years as the spouse of a sitting prime minister, she resisted letting the children become political accessories. That instinct only sharpened once the August 2nd, 2023 split was announced. She explained in interviews that the emotional climate at home mattered more than the public narrative, and maintaining normalcy for the children became the baseline priority. School routines, shared responsibilities, and predictable communication between both parents were intentionally preserved. She has also emphasized that despite the pressures around them, Justin remains fully available to the kids, a point often glossed over in the media storm surrounding his personal life. Sophie described their co-parenting dynamic as a partnership, one that still requires coordination, compromise, and respect. She noted that the end of a marriage does not mean the end of teamwork, especially when children are involved. Even as Justin stepped down from political leadership in January 2025 and began navigating life outside public office, Sophie stressed that the parenting rhythm continued. Birthdays, school events, day-to-day decision-making, and the subtle emotional navigation that comes with raising teenagers and a younger child under intense public scrutiny. But she also acknowledged the personal toll. Public life, she said, has a way of blurring boundaries until the family becomes an extension of the headlines. Every rumor, every photo, every critique has the potential to echo back into the household. She spoke of learning how to filter the noise, how to maintain a protective layer around the children, and how to separate personal hurt from parenting responsibilities. The spotlight may amplify emotions, but inside their home, she insisted, the focus remains on empathy and consistency. Sophie's mental health advocacy work has informed much of her approach. She often speaks about emotional resilience, and she applies those principles at home, teaching the children how to process public attention without absorbing it, how to stay grounded when the world creates its own version of their family story. In the end, this chapter of their lives is not defined by scandal, photos, or commentary. It is shaped by the deliberate, ongoing choice to prioritize their children above all. Their marriage may have ended, but their commitment to raising Xavier, Ella Grace, and Hadrian together has not wavered. But how did the world respond to these private choices? And could public opinion ever grasp the full story? Stay tuned, because what comes next will surprise you. Public reaction and what this means. Next, from brutal trolling to passionate defenders, the internet made its choice fast, and the intensity of the reaction showed just how emotionally invested the public still is in Justin Trudeau, Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, and now Katy Perry. Within minutes of the yacht photos going live, social platforms erupted with opinions that ranged from empathetic to merciless. Some users criticized Trudeau for moving on so publicly, while others insisted he was entitled to rebuild his life after stepping away from office. On the other side, Katy Perry's fans defended her fiercely, calling the reaction overblown and reminding critics that both adults were separated and free to live their lives. Media outlets joined the frenzy almost instantly. Page 6 highlighted the shock factor, spotlighting the kiss and framing it as the moment that broke the internet. Entertainment platforms like EW.com leaned into the celebrity angle, focusing on Perry's involvement and the surprising intersection of politics and pop culture. The reactions weren't mild. They were polarized, dramatic, and relentless. Some commenters argued that Trudeau had embarrassed his family, while others countered that he hadn't made a public statement, hadn't commented on the relationship, and had remained largely private since his January 2025 resignation. What made the conversation even louder was that neither Justin nor Katy offered any official comment. Aside from the photos and eyewitness accounts, the public had nothing to go on. No clarifications, no explanations, no denials. That silence left room for speculation, and the online world filled in the gaps, as it always does, with theories, projections, and assumptions. Sophie, meanwhile, unintentionally became the emotional anchor in the storm. Her heartfelt podcast comments, released just weeks before the photos surfaced, created a stark contrast between her vulnerability and the internet's fixation on Trudeau's new romance. Many users expressed sympathy for her, praising her composure and drawing attention to her devotion to her children. Others cautioned the public not to paint her as a victim, pointing out that she herself emphasized healing, personal growth, and co-parenting partnership rather than blame. So what does all this mean moving forward? Trudeau's public image is undergoing yet another transformation, one shaped not by political decisions, but by personal choices captured on camera. Katy Perry now finds herself part of a narrative she never publicly acknowledged. And Sophie stands at the center of a very different conversation, one about dignity, boundaries, and rebuilding. Where the story goes next depends not on the headlines, but on what these three choose to share, or not share, with the world. So, what do you think Sophie's tearful admission really reveals about the separation, a final closure, or the start of a deeper truth still unfolding? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe.